Okay, folks, we're swinging around into the last session on this chapter, and we wanted to talk about the age of a particular industry or product and how that affects the strategy that we will use in order to sell it. So there was an economist in 1966 who came up with an idea known as the product life cycle. And his name was Raymond Vernon. And what he discussed was that it seemed like products, like individuals, have a lifespan. So there's an introduction phase, there's a growth phase in the product itself, the product matures, and then also at some point the object or the product or even the industry may even die. And so it's one of those hotly debated topics that has been going around marketing forever. This particular article, you can find it on the Journal of Marketing, is by a marketing individual by the name of George Day. And what George Day kind of did is he described the topic in and of itself, and he talked about what are some of the things that you should expect to see if the product life cycle really exists, and what are some of the things that may eventually create or move the product life cycle. So he talks about the experience effect, the rate of diffusion, a lot of different things that go along with it. And it's a really interesting article. If you want to go and read it, I'll let you do this. There was it kind of also dovetails with another article that is actually on As You Learn, and this was by another marketing guru by the name of Thomas Robertson. And one of the things that Thomas Robertson says that's very interesting is that innovation is different from invention. And I think that's important. I want you to understand that, because what he says, Robertson said in 1967, was that innovation is not invention, because innovation changes things, changes the way people live. And so what he says is that innovation is in essence a process, and that if you look at the concepts by H.G. Bartlett, who was an anthropologist, he says innovation as the basis of a cultural change. It defines innovation as any thought or behavior that is new, that is considerably different. For him, innovation changes infrastructure. It changes leaders. It is a process that affects everything. And so if you look at the product life cycle, that's one of the things that's carried along with the product life cycle as well. Innovation changes things, and the product life cycle, it also carries this change with it. Now, they hotly debate whether the product life cycle really exists. There's many articles that have been written 20 and 30 and 40 years ago that says the product life cycle doesn't actually work. There are other studies that do show it works. There's, in terms of significant evidence of whether it does or not, depends on what kind of theoretician you listen to. Why do we still study it? Because it's useful. And that's one of the good things about knowing about the product life cycle, because it helps us anticipate change, and it helps us to plan ultimately how we should go about addressing competition and securing growth. So without further ado, let's kind of talk about what the product life cycle is. Okay? So the product life cycle is a concept that says that a product goes through a series of 4 phases. And if you look at it, you'll see this line here that shows profit, and you'll see this other line that says sales. And so what this says is that there are 4 stages in the cycle. There's the introduction, which is a period where the product is introduced. It starts to have a slow introduction. Education is important. Usually profits are non-existent. As a matter of fact, if you notice, this profit line is in the negative because it accepts that research and development costs have to be considered. The second is the growth period, where there's a rapid market acceptance, and in essence, this is the greatest amount of growth generally, or the fastest growth in the stage of this particular product. The maturity stage, where there's a slowdown in the sales growth, the product has achieved an acceptance by the buying community. And then finally, what's known as the decline stage, where there's a downward drift in the profits. It may ultimately mean that the product itself goes away, but it's also possible that the product may mature, may decline, but never, in essence, go completely out. The reason that I talk about it, that it may never go out, because consider certain things such as, let's consider staples, all right? There is no growth in the staple industry, although it is kind of unique. We do use staples now for surgery, but generally, what other reasons or purposes do we have for staples? Well, even though there is no growth, that it tends to be a mature industry, it's still an industry that has been around for a long time, and it'll go on forever. So there are some products that simply are no longer used or no longer exist. These are products generally that are considered obsolete, which means that there's something substantially better that completely replaces it. An example is whale bones used in women's corsets. Obsolescence, however, is a little bit different, because obsolescence means that the product functions, but there's something better. Okay? All right. So without all that further ado, first we talk about the introduction stage. And so generally in the introduction stage, the first company out, let's just talk about and say cell phones. The first company out usually has what are called the advantages of being a pioneer. Okay, so the first product out usually has their brand name established and thought of before any of the others. Let's use Apple, okay, and use the iPhone, or excuse me, the iPad. All right, the first product out the gate usually has the fastest and quickest recall. It establishes the attributes of that particular class in itself, and it captures more uses in the middle of the market as well. In essence, the first product out of the gate defines what the product is. And so some of the functionality that a tablet has that the iPad has brought about. So it has a screen, it has a touch screen on it, you can plug in an earphone, it has many unique properties about them, and the tablet industry as a whole generally follows those, all right? Generally during the introduction stage also, most of the advertisement is in the form of education, because the first time out of the gate, whenever you have a unique product, you're informing and educating the consumer how to use it. Microwaves, when they came out, is the classic example. Consumers were not quite sure the overall uses of a microwave, and that was what a lot of the initial kinds of advertisements were about. Now the difficulty is that the drawbacks of being a pioneer is that many times the imitators can surpass the innovators. So while the iPad has in essence marked substantial ground in the tablet industry, let's even go to the iPhone industry. Some of the difficulties when you measure against a Samsung is that a Samsung with the Android operating system can be plugged into your computer and used actually as a second drive or a thumb drive. That's one of the advantages, is there's greater flexibility. The other is that once leadership is lost, it's very rarely regained. And so depending on how you consider the success of the iPhone generally rests between number 1 and number 2. So, is there complete success in being the leader? Yes, but not always. Okay. And so the introductory stage, the advantages of being a pioneer, your brand name is known as number one, you establish the attributes of the product, and you capture more of the uses in the middle of the market. The drawbacks, of course, is that many times the imitators learn from your failures and they go on and do something substantially better. Now, the second phase is what's called the growth phase. And in the growth phase, it is the rapid or the most rapid increase in profit and sales during this stage. Usually what you find is that consumers will start to buy their second or third particular iteration of this particular product. And so what you find is that repeat buying starts at this time. So what you find also is that if you think of the very first iPad, remember how heavy and bulky it was. What you start to see is the second and the third iteration. So product quality generally ramps up. You add new features such as a higher resolution screen. Generally, you start to have unique new models and flanker products. One of the things that Steve Jobs said is that we will never have anything other than the 10-inch iPad. And in 2014 or 13, guess what they have? The 7-inch iPad. This would be an example of not only a new model, but a flanker product. And this is a product that competes against the Samsungs and the other ones, okay? You start to see the products enter into new market segments as well. If I look at the iPad as a design, think about its dramatic entrance into the medical industry. It means that in essence, instead of carrying so many charts or bulky pieces of information, it allows a physician basically to go from one office to the next. Anybody who has gone into the pediatric clinic here in Boone knows that usually if you sit down from the very beginning, you have an iPad to fill out, and guess what? You pay on that iPad before you ever get in to see the doctor. All right? You also see an increase in the distribution coverage. You see them enter into new distribution channels. So initially when the iPhone came out, it came out only through AT&T. Their contract lasted, I believe, 3 years, and then after that, you can find an iPhone anywhere. You also see a shift from the awareness and the education phase to the preference and loyalty communications as well. So what you try to do is, because you're securing that second and that third purchase of a particular item, what you're trying to do is, instead of talking about education and the uses, you're talking about the loyalty and the successes with that initial product. You also find that lower prices have started to come in, and they're starting to attract another layer of price-sensitive buyers. And so what you find is that where you had the trailblazers who were initially in with the first product, you're starting to see individuals who are not trailblazers, but very price-conscious individuals who wish to enjoy those particular products, but not have to spend the given money that it takes to enjoy them. So you go through the introductory stage, you're in the growth stage, you're starting to see more competition come in, you're seeing a wider and wider expanse of the number of unique models that are coming out with different features, and then what you hit is you hit the maturity stage. And in the maturity phase, this is the point where the rate of the sales slow down, and the product may enter in a stage of maturity where it is a long, protracted stage. And in this place, what you find is that it lasts longer in the product life cycle, but you also perhaps will see consumers stretching out the use of these particular items as well. And so what you see is that you see modifications or ways in which you try to sell in three different ways, okay? So what you might want to try to do is you might try to expand the market in a number of different ways. You may want to increase the number of different ways of usages per customer so that you can come up with unique ways of using it. And so this is where we talked about Arm & Hammer. Instead of just merely using it as baking soda, it's also used for something to put on your toothbrush and to also use inside your refrigerator. The difficulty is that competitors quite easily will match this strategy as well, so it doesn't always add itself as a way of separating yourself from the competition. The other way, as I've said, is that you try to improve the quality, the features, or the style of this unit. It's not uncommon for you to see different iterations of this particular product, reducing the price by necessarily limiting the unique features. So instead of having one particular product that is a catch-all be-all to everything that you want, maybe you focus on one or two unique aspects of this. So one of the things that you think about when the digital watch came out, we talked about the LG watch phone, and we talked about, if you look at the Apple phone and the Apple Watch, and when the Samsung watch came out, while they had a relative success, certainly not what they expected, the ones that you really see where success is are products such as Fitbit, where you have an exact, particular type of concept in mind, and those particular products increases its appeal because it focuses on one unique niche. It also, if you notice, style has something to do with it as well. So the aesthetic appeal of that particular product also means more to the consumer itself. The other thing is that you see the modification of the general overall market. So you might see things like price, the way it's distributed, the way it's communicated. All of those are ways in which you might modify the purchase of that particular item. So one of the things about the iPad was a substantial change is when those particular products were started to be seen in Walmart. That was a major change for Apple. It took it out of one of the more traditional standings, like in education, and in essence it became a mass item. Now, you also note that those particular items are not all of them, not all of Apple's items are found in Walmart, just some particular items. Okay? So, introduction phase, growth, maturity, and the last phase, which is known as decline. Okay? Every market, in many ways, matures and then declines. And so what marketing individuals have to decide is, what do we do? Okay? If market share is maintained and the overall market shrinks, then even though we maintain the same market share, we naturally have a decline in sales. And what you find is that the only way that you can grow in the decline stage is that you must take market share from your competitors. Now, generally in the maturity and in the decline stage, you'll start to see a shakeout of the weaker individuals, the weaker competitors in any market. But what you will generally see also is you'll see much increased competition between the suppliers of that particular product. There's always this discussion, where is the cell phone industry at this point? Well, it's certainly in the mature phase right now, where the only way particularly to gain customers is to grab them from someone else. And that is, until we hit some other major disruptive technology that comes along, I think we're going to see the cell phone in a mature stage for quite a while. Now, what do we do with underperforming products? Well, there's two possibilities that we have. One of them is harvesting, and the other is divesting. Harvesting is the process where you continue to keep a given product, but you remove any research and development, you remove any promotion, and you in essence allow that product to stand or fail upon itself. If it succeeds, then it's what we call a cash cow. In other words, it continues to generate revenue without putting any investment in it. And generally items like that you harvest, and if they maintain sales, well, that's a good thing. All right. Once again, if we look at staples as a particular item, staples have been around forever. I've only seen 2 commercials in my life on staples, and staples for Bostitch or was it the other one, Swingline, provide profits to them from now until who knows. All right. And so now you do see different versions and different models of those. So there is some changes, but the general rule is that they're in a maturity decline phase. The next is that you may see products be sold away completely, and this is what's known as divesting. Okay, so there are many products, even if they are basically revenue producers, that you might sell off to someone else, quite simply so that you can go on and pursue other goods. So, so Procter & Gamble used to have a soap powder or a laundry detergent called Oxidol. Oxidol was the most popular laundry detergent in the United States, especially during the 50s and 60s. Oxidol was advertised on every major daytime drama, soap operas if you want to say, every daytime drama in the United States. It was advertised on the 3 major networks from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. and that was the time that daytime dramas were on. It is literally the soap where the word soap opera came from. Okay? In the 70s, Procter & Gamble decided that they were going to move on to other ones such as Gain, and so what you saw is Procter & Gamble sold Oxidol off so that they could pursue other items. Now, you could go into Lowe's, you can go into any store, and you'll still see Oxidol on the shelf. Oxidol was bought by another corporation. They still use the brand. They're still getting money from that. So it kind of gives you an interesting juxtaposition. One company's divested decline product is another company's mature cash cow. Just depends on how you go about it. Okay? So that's the product life cycle. The last slide I want to kind of leave you with, and this is one really to ponder right now, especially if you think about where we're going to be after all of this is over, is how do you market in a slow growth economy? And certainly we're going to be in one of those for a while. Well, I think it'll take a while for us to get where we're going, but there's a part of me that says is that once we get past this, I think that there's going to be substantial growth. So, in tough times like that, how do we go about, reestablishing ourselves? Well, the first thing is we explore the upside of increasing investment. In other words, is there some way to take this product and change it so that it meets the market conditions, one that consumers would be more likely to wish to use in these uncertain times? The other is that we want to get closer to our customers and be able to satisfy them in any ways possible. With consumers having less money to spend, they're going to be more particular about the way that they purchase their items. And so if we have a greater understanding of what consumers look for, there's always a chance for a greater opportunity for growth. The other is that we need to review where we're spending our money as well. We might find that we have products that we have been pushing that may be long past their maturity stage, and they should have been, in essence, divested a long time ago. We reestablish with our products what makes them ideal, and we reestablish to the consumers a compelling value proposition where we line the benefits up that make that particular product unique and special, and hopefully provide our consumers with a greater understanding of why our product brings them value. And then the last is that we fine-tune the brand message that our particular products bring so that it in essence, more sharply defines the value and the benefit that it brings to our consumers. You'd also be surprised that even in hard times, luxury brands are considered even more valuable than ever before. Okay, folks, this is the writ for this chapter. I appreciate all of your support and all of your effort during these hard times. You're going to find me probably over the next week or two filtering out the rest of these. I'll be narrowing down what we have to talk about on each chapter. This one was a pretty heavy one, and I regret that. But before we go on to the next test, which I believe is scheduled for April 1st, I will do a broadcast, and then if you have any other questions that you need answered, please let me know. Okay, folks, have a great afternoon.